the content for this evening. The first thing I want to do is really just thank our members. We've had phenomenal growth in our community the past few years and have gotten a lot of support. And our membership is actually growing beyond the borders of Chicago even. So I would encourage you, if you're not a member, to go ahead and join through our website. We are offering a couple of discounts for those of you, particularly in the Chicago area. The Wild Birds Unlimited has discounts on some of their products. And then also, for anybody anywhere in the world, you can access the Cornell Lab library and our new sponsor, Feather Friendly, who you'll hear from later today. Also offering some discounts on their educational classes and the Feather Friendly bird tape that we're going to learn more about tonight. For our agenda, first we're going to hear from Carl and Claire on what's going on in the city of Chicago relating to bird safe building ordinance there. Chris is going to give us an overview of some simple home solutions. So we're encouraging everybody in our community to really take some action on this issue instead of just kind of being aware of it, but actually do something about it. And then we'll hear from Paul, our partner up in Toronto, on the Feather Friendly product, and as well as other things that they're doing in their community in Toronto and Canada. So I would like to do a round robin. So Carl and Claire, why don't you give us a quick intro on yourselves and how you got into this issue?
Sure. My name is Carl Giumetti. I have been on the board of the Chicago Ornithological Society for, I believe, 5 or 6 years now. And in my professional life, I am a practicing architect with Perkins & Will. So the notion of bird safe buildings was pretty much a natural marriage between my professional life and you know, my hobby as a birder. So it's something that I've worked with Bird Friendly Chicago now for really since its inception a few years ago. We've had good success and keep moving forward here. Claire?
Yeah, hi. I'm Claire Halpin. I'm an architect in Chicago, and I've just in the past year joined the Bird Friendly Chicago group that's working on this ordinance. But a lot of my career was at Studio Gang Architects, and I'm no longer there, but pretty much all of the projects we did had kind of took the issue of bird collisions into account. So it was something that was really central to a lot of my work at the firm. And yeah, that's about it.
Great, thank you. Chris?
Yeah, Chris Michalak. Guess what? 3 for 3. Also a practicing architect here in Chicago. So you know the story's kind of similar. You know, it's a perfect melding of the profession and the hobby, right? I have a former board member of COS, been a member of COS since 2013. Former VP of COS as well, and you know it's really an interesting issue. You know, especially you know, with the simple things that you can do to kind of make your home bird safe. And I'll talk about those a little bit later.
Cool. And Paul.
Hi everyone, my name's Paul Grollo. I'm Vice President of Feather Friendly. We are a bird collision mitigation company, actually celebrating going into our 16th year of business. We're based here in Toronto, Toronto being the first city in the world to develop bird safe guidelines. A lot of my focus is on the awareness and conservation end of things while providing a solution, working directly with architects, developers, and end clients. Yeah, happy to be here and happy to be associated with you guys, so thank you.
Yes, thank you too. We're so excited to partner up with you and try to get the word out and get some folks to put some feather friendly application on their windows, especially with spring migration underway. So Carl and Claire, why don't I turn it over to you to share your screen and start your part of the presentation.
Okay, everyone see my screen? Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, Claire and myself will give a little update on the Chicago Bird Safe building efforts here. We've kind of condensed a presentation that perhaps some of you have seen before at our annual meeting, but we're really going to touch on kind of three main topics here. Quickly, why is Chicago important when it comes to bird safe buildings? What makes buildings dangerous and what makes them safe? And then we'll give an update on the ordinance efforts. So kind of just starting out here, I know we have a very sympathetic audience that would tune into this, but for those of you who don't know, Chicago is an incredibly important city when it comes to bird migration. Due to a combination of a lot of factors, our location right on the lake, our location just in terms of a lot of major flyways for passerines and really all types of birds. We have a lot of birds coming through here, and like a lot of areas on edges where you have geographic features, edges of coastal areas on rivers and stuff like that, birds tend to collect along those edges. Well, Chicago having a large developed area right up against the lake here, we unfortunately are a fairly lethal combination when it comes to bird migration. In fact, a study by the Cornell lab determined that Chicago is actually the most dangerous city for bird migration. And this received, when the study first came out in 2019, it wasn't just in the birding community that it was talked about, but outlets like the Chicago Tribune, Sun Times, both reported on this and really put the task to Chicago to really address the situation and start helping protect birds. And the problem is rather acute. The birds you see here, these are 63 birds that were collected by the wonderful organization Chicago Bird Collision Monitors, just a few hours on a single day in just a small area of downtown Chicago. And so this only represents the birds that they can find. They try to log as many birds in as they can to get a scale of the problem, and they've logged in over 26,000 dead birds. And again, those are just the birds that we're finding in the loop. There are many times more. So the problem in Chicago is quite significant, and so this really kind of demands immediate action. So Claire's going to kind of touch on now what is happening. Why are these birds dying in our buildings in the city here?
Yeah, so just to go through an overview of what makes buildings dangerous, at its very essence, it's when part of a building is such that birds don't recognize it as a physical barrier. And glass is really key to that. And then what exacerbates, the glazed conditions is when lighting and interior landscaping actually make it worse. And so, I mean, this is a perfect example of a building that architecturally is amazing because it looks like it's not even there. And that's exactly what makes it dangerous for collisions. So next slide. So a few examples and of how this glazed condition really is a hazard. Reflective glass, so some glass that acts actually like a mirror. And a lot of people use this type of glass because it's very good. It can be very good thermally to prevent buildings from gaining too much heat. And of course, it's terrible for collisions because, as you can see in the image, I mean, even in this photograph, it kind of looks like parts of the solid glazed area aren't even there. And, we kind of see these cues like mullions, but that tell us that it's actually not that there's actually a solid surface there, but birds aren't able to recognize that. And similar in these types of conditions where there's, especially where they're adjacent to trees and there are reflections of the trees in the sky, these areas can look very much like there's nothing there at all. And so the opposite condition is actually when glass is incredibly transparent. And this is the case in a lot of lobby spaces or storefronts. There are certain types of glass, like low iron glass, that people use in those applications specifically for their transparency. And in a condition like this, like a lobby, where there are often plants behind it, it's especially dangerous. Next slide. See-through corners, so where there's glass and glass and outside beyond are quite hazardous too, because basically it makes the inside area backlit. So it makes the glass appear that it's not there at all. Next slide. And glass corridors are, it's a similar condition where the area inside is lit so brightly because it's glazed on both sides that it doesn't appear to be interior, and it seems continuous to the outdoors. Glass railings as well are quite invisible to both birds and humans sometimes, and you can see the marks here where collisions have occurred on a glass railing. And then lighting, of course. Lighting is especially dangerous because it can disorient, especially migrating birds, and so cause collisions from that disorientation and cause them to land in places that you wouldn't expect them to. So, all right. So how about, so what makes buildings birds safe? And the next few slides show a series of examples of buildings where the bird-safe solutions are really integrated. So they were planned from the beginning, which is what we hope will happen with the ordinance, so that they're not an afterthought. They're really sort of permanent parts of the building, and they're not, they're additive. They actually enhance the building. So this is an example of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden Visitor Center. It's an example of a building where they started in the beginning with bird safe glass. This glass has a frit on it, and it's especially important in buildings like this that are public buildings that are integrated in landscapes where there are a lot of bird populations there already. So, and next slide. And so here are a few of the sort of toolkit of solutions that architects can use. This is actually a project that I worked on at Studio Gang, and we also, in this case, integrated some of the solutions into the design early on. So in this case, this large sort of lecture space was facing a grove and had 20-foot high glass facing this sort of wooded area. We were able to put ceramic frit on the outside face of glass, and that's a permanent baked, it's like the ceramic glaze on a piece of pottery, except it's baked onto the outside face of glass. So it's a really permanent solution, and it solves both the problems of the sort of reflective hazardous condition and the transparent hazardous condition. And as you can see in the photo, it's not really obvious when you're in the space. You can still see through it. You can still experience the grove beyond. Next slide. Here's another example that I think is really interesting because it's a building that really wants to have a view, and it's in a really bad place for bird collisions because it's right on the lakefront. But what they did here, because the view is so important, is they used glass with a UV treatment, and there are a number of products that have this UV treatment now. And what's so interesting about it is that it does have a pattern that is very visible to birds, And while humans can see it, it's not really as visible. The spectrum is you know, you can kind of see a light pattern, but we don't see it as much of a barrier as birds do. And next slide. And here's an example that takes an entirely different tack, but is also really appropriate for this particular building in this place. This is in California. It's the De Young Museum. And as a museum, the views are not necessarily important, but they do need natural, the building does need sort of diffuse natural light. And so the building is sort of entirely wrapped with this perforated screen, which allows diffuse light to enter, but the views are not as important because it's sort of an inward facing building. So this is a really, really effective way of preventing bird collisions, and also just kind of integrated totally into the architecture. And I mean, one of the basic rules of thumb that you know, architects can use in designing a building is the 2x4 rule. And with these patterns or screens or whatever the case. And basically it's that whatever pattern or line you use, it should have this spacing as a minimum. And it's because birds have a little bit more sort of agility going up and down than side by side because of the wingspan. So you can kind of space those lines a little bit more when they're in the vertical direction than when they're in the horizontal direction. And yeah.
So, you know, one thing I just want to touch on here before we kind of give the quick update on the policy is that I think it's so important. I really like the slides that Claire put together there, is that, you know, a lot of times when you propose something that is going to affect buildings, especially, you know, the aesthetics of buildings, you know, there's kind of the accusation that it's, you know, anti-design or that you're shoehorning people into a particular style of design. You know, glass is an incredibly valuable material. Using glass is an incredibly valuable strategy for architects. It provides a huge number of design opportunities. There are many ways to have glass buildings that, you know, you're putting up now and still keep them bird safe. So I think that's one of the, you know, best things I think about the kind of collection of slides that Claire put together there, is that it really shows the full, you know, design toolbox is available to architects with bird friendliness. And so that's where, you know, when Bird Friendly Chicago was organized, we set out with the goal of enacting a bird friendly ordinance in the city. And so we've been working for the past couple of years. And most recently, we had a fairly decent victory where the city passed a measure that requires the Department of Planning to provide a lot of emphasis in their sustainable development policy for the bird-friendly ordinance as it's currently being written. And so, you know, I know for those of you who are not in the building industry, it's kind of, oh, that sounds great. Where, you know, does that apply everywhere? You know, what does a sustainable development policy mean? Well, essentially, the sustainable development policy is run by the Department of Planning, where any project that ends up going through that department has to adhere to. And what it is, it's a menu list of items, things like stormwater, energy, landscapes, green roofs, water conservation, and of course, wildlife conservation, which is where the bird-friendly policies land under. And they have to meet a certain tally. You can see here, there's some numbers, 20s, 5s, 10s. And let's say you do something that's really intensive. Let's say you save 50% of your energy from a baseline condition, you get 40 points. Let's say you design a bird-friendly building, you may get, you know, 20 points. And so developers need to accumulate this number of points in order to meet that policy. Well, who falls under that policy? It's basically a lot of building, you know, almost every skyscraper, every tall building falls under the Department of Planning's purview. Institutional buildings, planned developments, developments that are in particular corridors like the along our waterways like Chicago River, Calumet River, and projects that often fall under the Lakefront Protection Ordinance. Any project that gets TIF funding, that asks for zoning variance. So basically any project where the development team is asking for something from the city, the sustainable development policy applies. And so this is, the kind of the mosaic zoning map that is downtown Chicago here. You see, anything that's a PD is planned development. That certainly falls under Department of Planning and Development. Almost any D district, which is the downtown district, will fall under the Department of Planning and Development. So you can see here that we're applying it to a broad range of zoning designations that should hopefully attack the most problematic buildings. The buildings in the city where Chicago Bird Collision Monitors shows up and will pick up a dozen birds in a single morning. So obviously everyone wants to know, where does it not apply? What is left out? Well, for the initial effort here, 1 flat, 2 flat, 3 flats, or single family residences are being exempted. A lot of that is just due to the nature of how those buildings get built. They often do not have the level of sophistication in their design team that actually have an architect. Sometimes it's just a builder design home. And the fact that while these do kill a lot of birds, each individual building is much less a hazard than, for example, a glass box that's right on the lakefront in a commercial district. One day it would be great if we can expand the ordinance to include these types of projects, but for now these will be exempted. There are some areas here that you can see a lot of these R districts, do not apply. This is just, let's see, what park is this? This Humboldt Park. Okay. Yeah. So again, just, kind of the Chicago zoning map, and you can see a lot of the R's here do not apply. However, there is an effort to try to get it to projects that are bordering kind of what you would almost call regionally significant parks, like a Humboldt Park, where there's a lot of bird life and a lot of potential for bird collisions. And we're still working with the Department of Planning to really refine that. And obviously, our group wants to expand it to apply as many places as possible. And there's, the realistic limitations as to what they can implement at their level. But essentially what our ordinance is a calculation that, if you kind of start here at the left here, that identifies different zones on a building, basically what we call like the high hazard zone and the medium hazard zone, or the lower hazard zone, if you will. And this is something that really the American Bird Conservancy developed, and it's been around the U.S. Green Building Council for a while. And the idea of this is that we're going to try to protect the parts of a building that are the greatest hazard to birds. And the reason why zone 1 is what it is that the thought is that birds spend most of their time flying closer to ground level, about 50, 60 feet. That's where the trees are, that's where their food is. And so because they spend the most amount of time there, that's where we're going to have the most restrictive requirements. Other areas would be above amenity decks. We have these great green roofs in the city of Chicago. A lot of these are amenity decks that have landscaping on them. So we want to identify those areas as the high hazard zone as well. And so we take each of these zones, we assign a threat factor to each material, where a 0 is basically an opaque material. A brick wall, bird isn't going to run into a brick wall, one would hope. And so that is a threat factor of 0, whereas something like clear, transparent, or reflective glass will have a threat factor of 100. And so what you see here in the upper right corner is a weighted calculation that basically tries to determine what's called the building collision threat rating. It's basically a single number that can represent how bird friendly or bird unfriendly a building is. And so our ordinance is going to be shaped around this approach, where architects are going to be required at the time they submit to the Department of Planning, essentially a spreadsheet that demonstrates they are below a certain threshold for their building. And so, right now our efforts that Claire and myself and landscape architect Ted Wolf are working on is we're in the process of essentially writing a manual to the ordinance, something that the Department of Planning and Development is going to make available to the public, to architects, to really explain to them how to implement this approach. Like I said, the measure that was passed by City Council puts the onus on the Department of Planning to implement this policy. So they are eager to do it, and they've been very cooperative with us. And so we don't have a timeline just yet as to when these will go into effect. There is currently some bird safe measures being enforced by them as part of the policy, but this would be a much more rigorous rigorous approach. So, that's kind of where we're at. We're very close to having a really rigorous ordinance applied to a lot of high hazard projects. What is the next step for us here? The next step really is to turn this policy into law. Policy is great. It really, for all practical purposes, acts just like it were the law. However, if a different administration were to come in and this was not a priority to them, they can change the policy. What we want is something that, is written into the city ordinance, just like, density requirements, use requirements, things like that, that is, kind of has the full force of any other ordinance. And then the second one, as I mentioned earlier, is we just want to keep expanding the number of projects it applies to. I think we're, taking a good approach because it addresses the most dangerous projects, but obviously, all buildings present some sort of threat to bird life here. And I think one thing I just want to clarify as I kind of wrap up here that I mentioned, is that this really only applies to new projects. So folks that are sitting at, at your house wearing like, oh my God, am I gonna have to buy all new windows? No, you don't have to go buy all new windows. If you do a major renovation that involves windows, those new windows may one day have to be bird friendly. But right now, this is really only applying to new projects. So that said, that's kind of our spiel here. And Lindsay, am I segueing to Mr. Michalak?
Yep, Chris is up next.
All right.
And just for everybody, I forgot to mention at the beginning, we're going to have open for Q&A and discussion at the end. So if you're too shy to ask questions now, we'll make time for that at the end.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I was on mute. Man, why am I the guy that got to be that guy today? All right, sorry about that. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about first, thanks to Carl and Claire for doing the kind of brief intro to the basics for design for bird-safe buildings, and a lot of those concepts apply to what I'm going to talk about, and these are really just simple DIY, things to do at your house, real low tech that can help make your building, your house, your home, your apartment, what have you, a little bit more bird safe. Now, none of these solutions are going to be 100%, but any little bit can help, right? If you can avoid getting, a bird strike at your home, which is, could be very traumatic, especially if you witness one, all the better. So we're going to talk about, why is I can't change slides. That's weird. Here we go. All right, got it. Okay, so real quick, we're gonna have some window solutions, some home solutions, yard solutions, a brief talk about products, and then I have a little references section as well that I probably won't go through too much detail, but I think this will be made available for anyone that will like to see what those websites are. So window solutions, we all know that a big old picture window on your home is probably not a very good bird safe condition. So things you can do. First of all, the best place to put, the best place to do all of these things is on the outside of your house, on the outside of the window. It's called surface one. So in the jargon in the industry is that if you have a double pane window, with two pieces of glass, in your window frame, there's 4 surfaces there, and surface one is the outside surface. Don't wash your windows. It's a really simple way to kind of decrease reflectivity that Claire and Carl were talking about, to increase kind of just an awareness that there's a surface right there for a bird. Keep your window screens installed. If you're in the winter and you swap out, screens for storm windows, that just keeping the screens on there will help, just create a little bit more of an awareness to a bird that there's something in the way. A lot of times, if you go to the zoo, especially Lincoln Park Zoo, they do this all the time for some of their exhibits. They'll soap their windows. They'll just put like a coating of soapy water that creates a white film over the window. And that's, obviously a temporary solution, probably a seasonal solution. It probably needs to be reapplied after a rainstorm kind of thing. You can also do some interesting things with tempera paint. Tempera is environmentally friendly. It's not going. It's biodegradable. You could paint some designs on your windows. Maybe have some fun with your kids. Another thing you can do is to hang some strings from in front of your window. Literally hanging strings. Like get some twine, nail them up to, or thumbtack them, or somehow apply them to the front of your window, keeping in mind that a vertical obstruction for a bird needs to be max 4-inch spacing that Claire touched upon. Similar ideas are some tapes and decals. Those are some commercial products. We'll touch on those a little bit later. Home solutions. So this is stuff you could do on the inside of your house to, help decrease bird collisions. Move your plants away from the windows. Don't have something that looks like an inviting place to perch close to a translucent or transparent surface. Turn off your lights at night. This kind of goes in conjunction with the Lights Out Chicago program that I know a lot of you are familiar with. You could do that at your house too. It doesn't have to be the big tall buildings downtown. Close your window shades. Although it's not surface one, it does make your windows much more opaque on the outside. Yard solutions, and I chose a photo here. This was a bird feeder at my old house. Took a picture through my gloriously uncleaned window. Never had a bird strike. Anyway, the 3-foot or 30-foot rule. Sort of counterintuitive. Put your bird feeders like really, really close to your windows, within 3 feet. The picture here, this is about a foot away from the surface of the glass. The idea is that birds don't have enough space to get up to speed to have a major impact with the glass if they're that close to the glass. It also, it's kind of cool to see the birds come really close to you. I mean, I was literally, this is no Zoom, this is nothing. This red-breasted grosbeak had no idea I was there. I was maybe 3 feet away from him. It's kind of cool. Conversely, farther than 30 feet from your windows. If you do want them in your yard, I know that might be challenging in some Chicago yards, but further than 30 feet gives the birds enough of an awareness that there's a structure, that direction, so to speak. Turn off your exterior lights. Again, goes along with the whole lights out thing. Or if necessary, use motion sensors, just because I know we still need some security out there, but keeping the lights down at night will certainly help with migration and impacts at night. If you have a real problem window and don't want to do, you want to clean your windows, another idea might be to hang some wind chimes near that window. The wind can be your friend with kind of an object that is almost constantly moving in front of that window. The birds have a tendency to avoid that space. So again, none of these are 100%, but they're all, every little bit is kind of incremental help. Commercial products. The American Bird Conservancy has a wonderful list with threat ratings of commercial products available. 0 being the least threat and 100 being the most. So I would refer you to that website. And then of course, our friends over at Feather Friendly which I believe that this is a feather-friendly product in this photo. They also have a lot of great products, especially residential products that you can install yourself. And obviously we'll get into more of that later on in this program. Some resources, American Bird Conservancy, great. I mean, they do great work. They're the ones that came up with the scientific method to measure the effectiveness of some of these bird collision mitigation products. And I just lost, did I lose my screen?
Yeah, it's just all white.
Sorry about that. Let's see. I don't know what happened there. I think I might have hit
We're still hearing you.
Okay, great. Well, anyway, there's a bunch of other websites out there. Let's see. There's, I'm sorry about this, guys. Okay. So
if you can't get it to work, we can pop it up, maybe after Paul's presentation,
yeah,
if you'd like.
Absolutely. I don't know what's going on here. It's very weird. Okay, sorry about that. So, Chicago Bird Collision Monitor is another great website. And also their hotline, 773-988-1867. I have that in my speed dial on my phone. Especially if you do get a bird collision at your home, you can call them and hopefully they can come out and either retrieve the bird or bring it into like a place like Flint Creek Wildlife Center or Willowbrook Wildlife Center. Obviously, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is a great resource as well. And that's about it. So thank you, COS, Feather Friendly, CBCM, Bird Friendly Chicago, and all of our other partners. And like I said, I think we're going to make this presentation available to on the website later on, or it'll be posted on Facebook or something like that. So I guess with that, I will hand it over.
Definitely echoing Chris, though, and put Chicago Bird Collision Monitors in your speed dial. The number of times that it comes up when you least expect it and you need it, it's very handy to have on hand.
Yeah, I'll call attention to the chat. Robin, thank you for posting that website and phone number for everyone. So for those of you who live in the Chicago area, just a quick aside, I actually think the bird collision issue is what got me into birding generally. Right after I moved to Chicago, I did join COS recreationally, but on my way to work, I found a Tennessee warbler on the sidewalk on Halstead Street. And I did not know anything about the whole window strike issue. And I just thought it was weird that it was there. And I picked it up, put it in my pocket, took a cab to the lakefront and released it out at one of the bird sanctuaries, and then mentioned it to some of the other folks in the COS group. And they let me know about CBCM, the Chicago Bird Collision Monitor organization, and the issue of bird strikes. So I started volunteering with that organization, and I did a route like every Tuesday morning for 3 hours. I would patrol downtown and collect injured birds. And I mean, it really changed my whole life, really. And I got more and more involved in COS because of it. So, and before we get to Paul, on that note, I wanted to share a photo at, this is me at my house. This is the first year that I've had a house that's my own. And we unfortunately had, I think, 5 strikes before I was able to get the feather-friendly tape up. But just as a testament to the effectiveness, just a plug for this group, and they've been amazing to work with as a customer. I got a whole new package in today to finish some windows at my new house. But this is our back deck, and we definitely had a strike as soon as this door went in, and I got the tape up the next day, and we haven't had any strikes since. So yeah, it's worked out really great. So Paul, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect, thank you. And Lindsay, that was a perfect example of how glass, based on different parts of the day, how it can change. It looked very black. It looked like a dark hole in behind you from that angle. A lot of times when we get contacted, I highly recommend that people go outside and take a look at their glass during various parts of the day. Some people don't really get 100% idea on the reflective nature, again, at various parts. Something on the interior, applied on the interior, whether it be drapes or blinds, etc., can be totally non-effective or not even seen based on lighting conditions. And I apologize, everyone, if there is going to be a little bit of overlap with sort of my thoughts. I'm not a slide guy because Christopher sort of proved to me in the fact of I'm not a tech guy, and I'd have this all jumbled and wrong and everything else. So I'd rather talk. I got the gift of gab, and when you need to give me the hook, do it. Feather Friendly history. How we got involved. As I mentioned at the start, we've been doing this for about 16 years. The City of Toronto was the first city in the world to develop bird safe guidelines. And we were involved in the standpoint, our sister company, we're the 3M master distributor for Canada of window films. So between the City of Toronto and an organization called Flap Canada, we were approached on how we can come up with mitigation solutions for existing buildings. Fast forward 15 years, Feather Friendly, it's its own incorporated company. We do all our own manufacturing and converting and shipping worldwide out of our, out of Toronto. We have done projects literally all over the world. We've been working with the South Korean government for the last 1.5 to 2 years on their noise collision barrier issue, which is what we refer to as a fly-through, which was talked about earlier. We've done universities, colleges, zoos, military, government, state parks, and everything in between. We do offer a commercial solution as well as a DIY solution. I guess to backtrack a bit, for us, there's sort of 4 key items to any bird deterrent, whether it be ours or whether it be someone else's. A lot of times best practice is first surface exterior application. The whole idea is you're breaking up that surface reflection of the glass. And Janet had mentioned earlier when Chris had the picture up of Feather Friendly, she had mentioned that it still looks very reflective. And yes, it will. However, the markers on the glass are enough of a noise or an interference for a bird to go, whoa, I don't want to go there. There's something there. And that's the cool thing about a lot of the treatments is the majority of the glass is still untreated. So with Feather Friendly, depending on the spacing pattern, approximately only 6 to 8% of the glass surface is even treated. So as far as your view, we've done houses, multi-million-dollar homes that are in Architectural Digest magazines on the California coast, that they were very concerned on how it was going to impede their view and the aesthetics to the building. Believe it or not, within 2 or 3 weeks, you don't really realize any of the bird deterrents that are there. It's almost like looking through a window with a screen. You may see the screen at first, but you look through the screen. It's the same with the markers, and maybe Lindsay can attest to this, is probably the first few weeks you walked past that door, you would see the markers. Because a lot of times people say, well, do you see the markers when they go up? Well, yeah, it was a clear window before, and now you're putting something on there, so you're looking directly at it. Give it 2 weeks' time, and it's basically not there. We've had commercial installs where we've done it and we've gone back and asked people, you know, what'd you think? And they're like, oh, it's already been done. So it's that unobtrusive. It doesn't really change the aesthetics too much. Oh, Carolyn just put that only lasts a few days when you see it. So thank you, Carolyn. So the 4 key points to any bird deterrent: that first surface exterior, spacing. Best practice is 2x2 if you can. We have just launched about 6 new commercial patterns that have various spacing options. Primarily, we sell the tighter patterns. Toronto being in a major migratory bird path, we see a lot of the smaller species come through, in particular hummingbirds as well. When the standard was first put in place about 15 years ago, to appease the building community, they went with a 4x4 spacing. So you can imagine a square 4x4. Nice area for some of the smaller species of birds to come through. We rallied and actually had that standard changed to 2x2 as of January 1st of 2020. So you're seeing best practice standards talking about that smaller spacing patterns. Third issue is contrast. It needs to be seen. There has been some great advances in the UV end of things. We do know that various birds see various nanometers through the light, the UV spectrum. Not all songbirds have strong UV detection. So there is, it's definitely a solution that is becoming more and more advanced. You know, it needs to be seen. You know, our product is tested and approved by ABC, and you know, endorsed by Dr. Daniel Clem, who's been researching strikes since 1974. We have done a lot of custom work where a lot of people refer to our product as white. It actually is a pro gray, but we've done various shades of gray to match the aesthetics of a building. We've worked with various partners. We've actually done a few universities where we've actually done colored markers to coincide with the color of their school colors. Long as there's that contrast there, it does alert the bird to something being there. And last that's talked about is height. So here in Toronto, the standard is basically your first 4 to 5 stories or top of the mature tree canopy, whichever is greater. So for us in Toronto, trees aren't as tall as they are on the West Coast out in BC. So that is something to consider. I know Carl's slide did point towards that critical area, being that area that's more sort of along that treetop idea. Collisions can happen higher in a building, we do know that, but they're so few and far between. And, you know, for cost effectiveness, the more bang for your buck is addressing those lower stories and all the facades, if at all possible. You know, the big issue when we got into this was reflective glass. That was the big issue. More and more, we're seeing the fly-through zone that was touched on, the clear railing systems, the clear walkways, raised walkways. That's become a really, really big issue. And we've actually, with clear railing systems, we actually recommend our black product. And the idea behind that is it can be seen better on the non-application side and just as seen as well on the application side. We've done a lot of research with South Korea government on their noise barrier systems using black. So again, we've done projects worldwide, the commercial solution, and you know, the commercial buildings is where it became the biggest issue, the biggest focus. You know, downtown Toronto, the financial district, you know, you might have 1,000 people going into a building in a day, in and out. stepping over dead birds. So that's what got the immediate focus. That's where we got our start. It was about 8 years ago we got into the DIY end of things, because as we know, research shows that homes are probably the largest killers of birds based on the sheer volume of them. Little story from last year, if there's any silver lining in this awful pandemic that's happened. March 24th, we were told that we needed to start working from home. Spring migration starting to get into to full effect. Our business, and we're forever grateful for this, exploded in the residential market. If I had a nickel for every phone call or email we got for someone saying, I thought I had 1 or 2 bird strikes a migration season or a year, I've had 6 today. And the reason being is people were working from home. They didn't realize how big of an issue it was before. We know based on research that by the time you get home from work in a day, there might not be any notification or sign that there's been a collision. There could have been a bird hit, killed, scavenged by a squirrel, raccoon, other birds. There's actually documentation where birds of prey are actually starting to change their behavior based on glass buildings, literally sitting across the street on telephone poles waiting for a bird to hit a window, and they'll go down and snag it. We do know that, sometimes birds strike and they're stunned and they'll come to, and their first thought is to fly away into local vegetation because they're scared. So the residential market, there's a lot you can do. Our solution, other solutions can be fairly inexpensive. One of the questions that we get is durability and longevity. So on our DIY product, you're going to expect at least 8 years plus. And that's with regular cleaning. With our commercial solution, you're 12, 15 years plus easily. Again, we've been doing this for so long now, we haven't had any of our clients call us back and say, okay, it's now time to replace it and put on new markers. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second.
I was going to chime in too, Paul, and this issue I advocate, sort of low key to friends and family, where they'll see a bird strike and they say, well, the bird sat there for a while, but then it went away, so he's fine, and I don't need to do bird tape. And the thing is, we don't know if that bird is actually fine. Maybe it's going to be fine, but maybe it's injured enough that it becomes prey to something when it wouldn't normally become prey. Maybe it dies later. Maybe it's injured, it has trouble finding food. Like, you just don't know. And so to say that it got up and it left means that it's okay. That's not a really good standard of judgment on whether, your window is a danger. It could very well have killed that bird later.
Oh, and research does show, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news because we see people post on Facebook groups all the time. It hit the window, I held it for a few minutes and it flew off, so it's okay. It's great to think that way, but research shows that more often than not, those birds go away and die. And the whole idea to it is it's, think about humans as concussions and what we go through. A lot of times these birds need to be treated with antibiotics by a rehabber and, to stop the brain swelling. Internal bleeding and hemorrhaging is what's going to take these birds over time. It could be that day, it could be 2 days from now, sort of thing. I love Robin's comment. And I'm sorry, I've got the chat off to the side, so I go to it. Robin mentioned prevention is so much more important than rescue, and that's massive. That is 100% true, and there's so much that we can do to really change and have a great, and I hate using this word, impact on bird conservation. One of the things that really got me excited about Feather Friendly when I joined was the fact of being a part of change. We have sort of well, we've got a motto. We talk about education, conservation, while offering a proven solution. The more we can talk about this, the more it's raised, the more conversation around it, the more people are going to do something about it. Now, one thing I will end with, and I'm not sure on my timing, Lindsay, if I'm going too long, but one thing that we do get asked a lot with the DIY or even the commercial, can it be taken off? Yes, it can be. So for people who are renting or leasing a home or are worried about the resale value of their home, the markers can be taken off when needed. Any adhesive residue can be taken off with a cleaning solution and you're good to go. So guys, I could keep you here for the next 2 hours. I will not do that. You know, I think I've tried to cover off as much as possible. We're always available for anyone who has any questions. They can email me directly. I'll throw my email into the bottom there by all means. And thanks, guys. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Paul. I did want to also add another comment that we actually just sold our house, the one that I showed you the picture of, and we left a brochure for Feather Friendly on the like a stack of them, and it explained to the agents like this is what this is. This is why we did it. We had 5 strikes on this house. We wanted to do the right thing. And I think when people understand what it is, they're not going to want to take it off. But if they walked up to the house and they're like, why do these people put all these crazy squares on all of their windows with no explanation, then maybe. But we got a buyer that really appreciated the gesture. So I say don't be afraid to leave it up there. It's not necessarily going to be a negative impact on your resale value.
And you just made a good point about, you know, educating the people. One of the things we do for all our commercial projects is we do a project recognition program where we do educational graphics. You've got someone there, you're at a public building, why not educate them? You know, we've done that for bus shelters with Oklahoma State University. We've done that with a ton of buildings. We might as well educate as we're going too. Why are there dots on the window? A lot of people are not even aware of this issue.
Yeah, exactly. So I know some folks are probably getting ready to leave, even though we're going to stay on for any Q&A or other discussion. But I want to let everyone know on this meeting that we're providing a discount on the Feather Friendly website. So when you go to check out there, you can either do the discount version where you get a discount on the actual product, or if you want to do a donation of your discount to COS, you can use the second code that I've posted there below with the donation part in the code. And then I had for Chris, I don't know what you were trying to get to for Chicago bird collision monitors, but I just wanted to post this phone number back up for folks who are in the Chicago area. Another thing you all can do, I know that Annette and the team that work with that group have training for volunteers, but honestly, if you've got little paper bags, little sandwich paper bags that you carry around, you know, picking up a bird that's injured is better than leaving it there and getting it to rehab. So that'd be like my pro tip is to always have like a few paper bags, you know, in your bag with you as you're walking around. And if you're not in the Chicago area, a lot of wildlife rehabbers in other states, like I took one to a titmouse that hit my house to a rehabber here in North Carolina. So.
And just, you know, what I honestly do, you know, especially during the spring and fall migration periods, I carry around in my bag some paper bags, and I usually don't have time to kind of stick around until someone comes and grab it. So you can take the bird, put it in the bag, fold it nice and tight. The bird's not going to suffocate or anything like that. And usually I'll find like a little plant bed and stick it there. And I will call Chicago Bird Collision Monitors. You know, sometimes I get someone, sometimes I get their message, and I'll leave them very explicit, you know, instructions on where the bird is. And almost every single time, you know, I'm, you know, running off to work for a meeting or something like that, finish my meeting, come back out, you know, either someone else came along and grabbed the bag or someone from Chicago Bird Collision Monitors did. So They are, like I said, incredible volunteers, and anything that you can do, they can't save all their birds, but if they get to them, soon enough, they usually can save a lot of the birds that they recover. And even the ones actually that are, that you find that are dead, if you can collect those do go to the Field Museum's collection, and at the very least they can help support science after after they've been killed in the bird collision. And there have been a lot of really fascinating studies that the Field Museum has principally based around specimens collected by bird collision monitors. So there's lots of ways to contribute there.
Does anybody have any other questions? And I'll volunteer myself for anyone that does take advantage of the feather-friendly DIY product. If you want to ask me about how to put it on there, any like tips and tricks or anything like that, I'm happy to share or do a guided tour. One thing I found, if you've got a cat, they love it. They'll sit outside the window and they'll watch you like running the little tape thing across, and you can have a really good time with your pet. And as my partner Carolyn said, you really don't see it from the inside of the house anymore. Once it's up, it's like there are some angles where you don't even see it at all. And I actually had a neighbor who thought we were just artistic, and he thought it was like a cool artistic thing that we were doing until we explained it to him. So not everybody's gonna think it's weird, especially when you tell them what it's for. I think it's just a matter that most people don't know. It's not the norm yet. I'm hoping one day that it will be more the norm, that you just have bird tape on your windows because it's the right thing to do.
Hey, Megan in the chat had an interesting question. Theo, shush. Do resident birds like chickadees or cardinals become adjusted to the dots like a human does, or is it more effective for migratory birds who just pass through briefly? I thought that was a interesting question.
So resident birds do collide with buildings less than migratory birds, especially your nocturnal migrants. Whether or not it's because they learn about glass, because you think of, let's say, a Blackburnian warbler, when it's migrating through, it spends maybe a couple total days of its life in an urban environment as it's going from its wintering grounds to its breeding grounds. However, resident birds do run into buildings. They collect blue jays, chickadees, downy woodpeckers, northern cardinals. Certainly a far less frequency than they do, again, like I said, your migrants. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure they've probably had a couple of crows. I mean, but crows generally are not building collision victims. So yeah, there is some probable evidence that they learn to see buildings, learn the cues. But yeah, I know there still is a lot of science trying to figure out why some birds are incredibly prone to that and others are not.
And I will add, a lot of domestic birds, as Carl mentioned, will still collide. And actually, with the eruption of chickadees in our area last year, there was a mass strike where over 680 chickadees collided in one morning and were killed. FLAP went and did the rescue efforts. They were able to get some that were okay and sent off to the rehabber, and the rest were collected for the Royal Ontario Museum.
Ruth posted a question here. Sorry, did anyone else have anything to add on that before?
Oh, I was just going to mention that in Charlotte last fall, in Charlotte, North Carolina, there was a similar event with, what are the birds that live in the smokestacks? Chimney swifts. Chimney swifts, thank you. There was a mass killing of chimney swifts that ran into the NASCAR museum, and they took it for an entryway because they had the lighting on at night, and it was just like 400 or 500 birds died. Yeah, that's where obviously any bird death is tragic, but chimney swifts have a rapidly declining population, so that's just adding insult to injury there.
And sorry, just to add one more thing, or two more things. In Philadelphia in the fall, there was a collection of over 1,500 birds in one day over a handful of buildings. And we do know, and I don't know if this is shared, and it's usually part of my discussion, is, and it's up to 1 billion, and that's with a B, that are killed per year in North America. So, you know, it's great that this is a topic of discussion and that people are doing something about it.
And this is where, you know, we talk about, you know, the ordinance here, and I'll touch on Ruth's question. You know, yes, we're trying to attack the worst buildings because, okay, you know, this one building at State and Madison may kill, you know, 600 birds over the course of a year. But, you know, even if your house only kills 3 or 4, if everyone on here can, you know, take those measures to protect your house, you know, there were 50 people on here at one point. If everyone takes those measures, we can have an impact that's actually greater than the impact of the ordinance that we're trying to pass. And so, you know, the more you spread out, you know, every window you can protect in your house, every time you can convince a neighbor, a friend to do it, you know, that adds up pretty quickly. And really, you know, that 1 billion statistic, 1 billion birds killed statistic is not just by looking at, you know, Manhattan, Chicago, and downtown LA. It's looking at the number of homes in suburban environments and neighborhoods and stuff like that. So, you know, that's really where we can aggregate our efforts together and start to make some pretty big impacts. And so really quick, Ruth, with your question, the ordinance would not apply to that project because it's already underway. Typically when projects go to the Department of Planning, it's fairly early on in the design process. So there are some areas like Lincoln Yards that we've really been pushing hard to make sure the ordinance applies there. We've been working with the Alderman Hopkins, who has been really one of our biggest advocates and you know, sponsors in the City Council. So, you know, it really is a race here because, you know, the best time to enact a bird-friendly ordinance was 30 years ago. The next best time is tomorrow. You know, so we are pushing. You know, had that project first gone to the Department of Planning, let's say a couple months from now when the policy is in effect, yes, that building likely would have fallen under this ordinance. And then, oh, it's just not been approved yet. If it's been submitted to the Department of Planning, generally the way building codes and ordinances work is that you are subject to the codes and ordinances at the time you make your first initial submittal. So if it's public, if it's, you know, going through the process for that project, it's probably already in the queue and will not be subject to that ordinance.
Carl, on that topic, what are the like that building? I'm familiar with that building, Ruth. I lived in that neighborhood, just a block or two down from it, from that site. Why wouldn't they want to incorporate some bird-friendly measures? Like I know my DIY bird tape. You know, it took me a few hours to do my house. Like a building like that, maybe it's 12 stories. Is it really that exorbitant of an additional cost to do something, particularly on maybe the open side toward the lake?
It can be, but I'm going to turn this over to Claire here. And Claire, maybe you can just answer the question: is the projects you worked on where there were bird safe building measures, why did you guys do it?
Why did we do it, or
Yeah, was it the developer saying I want to do this? Was it just you, the architect, saying, hey, this is the right thing to do, and pulling a fast one on them, or you know?
Well, I would say it's a combination of reasons. One of the first projects where this became an issue that we were aware of was the Ford Calumet Environmental Center, which that particular version of the building was never built, but we became aware of it because it was a nature center in the middle. It was supposed to be a nature center in the middle of Hagbush Marsh, and so doing research for that project, it became clear that this was such an important ecological area. We became aware of the issue of bird strikes, and that this was just it would be a really bad thing for a nature center in the middle of Hagwish Marsh to have a ton of bird strikes. So a lot of the projects that I worked on was because they had an environmental component. They were nature centers. A lot of other projects are higher ed, and a lot of universities are motivated to prevent bird strikes, maybe because they have, because biology is part of their curriculum, or in a lot of other cases, there are, monitors are bringing this problem to their attention and sort of making owners and developers kind of pushing them to be aware of the issue. And so they're motivated to avoid doing it. And in some cases, I would say, and this is where making it an ordinance is helpful, is you can kind of incorporate these things into the design so they really aren't additive. And that was kind of what I was trying to point out a little bit in some of those slides of other projects is, I'll be honest, the DeYoung Museum, the one with the screen, I don't actually know if they intended to make it a bird safe building. I actually don't have any idea whether that was an intended part of the design, but it is a very effective way of doing it. And so if we can start early in design, incorporate whatever, kind of strategy, it doesn't necessarily have to add a lot of additive cost. Certainly some different glass products can be more costly, and it depends on the design, but the more integrated it is, the more you can kind of make it something that, say the developer doesn't even care that much about it. If it's integrated in a way that works with the building, if it does other things that are kind of in sync with the other objectives of the building, then there's no reason to object. And maybe a developer doesn't even necessarily need to know that that's part of it. It's just so integrated.
I think that's a great point, Claire. And something like external sunshades, depending on the spacing, obviously they can't be spaced totally apart, but external sunshades can have energy benefits that actually do lead to cost savings on a project. Mm-hmm. So, it just really depends on the creativity of the professional. And really, once there's an ordinance in place, it kind of forces that creativity into every project. Architects, not to toot my own profession's, horn here, but, we're problem solvers, and we try to find creative solutions to problems. And if this is the ordinance, there are any number of solutions that are waiting to be discovered out there when it comes to creative solutions for bird safety.
Right, and I will say that the other thing that an ordinance would do, and any sort of regulatory thing like this does, is it kind of makes the community that is making these products, whether they're glass products or screen products or whatever, it really pushes manufacturers to create things that also solve the problem, because now all of a sudden architects, owners are trying to find things that satisfy the requirements. So
manufacturers like Paul.
And it's funny you say that, Claire, because when we first started, everyone wanted something that was, again, the least obtrusive aesthetically, wanted it very aesthetically pleasing. Where fast forward 15 years to now, I'm working with architects where they're now embracing it. If we have to do it, let's think outside the box. Right. Let's come up with patterns, with graphics, with this, with that enhance the building, maybe even tell a story. University of British Columbia has a perfect installation where what they did is they actually threw it out to the university attendees and basically said, we want to do a bird safe design on the cafeteria bank of windows. And an English major actually won the design competition. And what it is just local vegetation with birds, etc. So it's a full graphic that's been applied to all these windows, but it acts as a bird deterrent. And from the interior, you can see through. So it's a win-win-win scenario. So it is a perfect point. Nowadays, it's being embraced, and it is pushing the envelope of companies like us. What else can we do? What else can we offer? What designs, custom application? So that's where, you know, we see, you know, our company going towards so much right now.
Yeah, that reminds me of another project that I worked on where we actually made the glass treatment part of the super graphics. So it was also kind of doubled as signage and graphic identity for the building, which really made it hard to say, oh, let's just not do this, because if we deleted all of that, then we would have had to add a whole other layer of signage, and that way the bird strike prevention component was actually doing multiple things and intended to be seen.
Well, I think that we're kind of probably getting past the point of folks' attention span, and I actually have like 10 other questions, but I won't get into them too much here. My last thought is that, you know, if you can advocate for bird safe measures in the building you live in or the office building you work in, do it. I know with the Audubon Society here, the chapter I'm working with, we're working on a advocacy on a building near the forest preserve here that they're trying to work on. So anywhere you can kind of get this on the radar, it's really just getting I think it's right now just making it an issue that is on the minds of folks that are building. There's just so much of our population that doesn't know about it. So talk about it, get some feather-friendly bird tape on your windows, and keep in touch with any of us. If you've got further questions, you know, feel free to email the Chicago Ornithological Society, and we'll get back to you. And thank you so much to all of our presenters today. Great job. It was a fantastic discussion. Really appreciate all of your expertise on this topic, and, you know, every little bit forward we can make on this issue is definitely worth it. So thank you, everybody. And thank you to all our attendees as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, Lindsay.
So much.
All right. Have
Thanks,
a great
Paul.
night.